Sun Devil fans, it is a Thursday edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, talking to you today essentially about the start of Senior Bowl week, which kicks up next week, but we're going to be previewing that for you today as our own Richie Bradshaw will be there at Mobile in Alabama, reporting everything for the ASU Sun Devils. I guess I should say more so along the lines like Rachaad White. Then we're going to be talking about the East-West Shrine Bowl, previewing the 5 Sun Devils playing in that game. And then also talking about a narrative potentially for ASU and essentially not getting enough foul calls, especially as of late. You're listening to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Richie, you did this yesterday. This is twice this week. That's strike 2. If I have to do that one more time, I'm gonna call your mom. I don't know who to talk to. I don't.
I don't know.
Let me speak to your manager. That's what I need to do. I need to speak to your manager.
He's also your manager.
Oh, that's right. Welcome, Sun Devil fans, to a Thursday edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast. Talking to you again about some Senior Bowl information, more so as a preview going into next week. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, especially going into this week. We're going to be giving you everything Rachaad White related. But you can find me at Cedrios and find Richie Bradshaw at Richie Brads with a Z36. Make sure to follow our Locked On Sun Devils Twitter page. That's at LO_Sun Devils. And we also have content that comes out Monday through Friday for you guys. So make sure to hit subscribe, whether that's on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, Stitcher, and now YouTube as well. So make sure you guys never miss an episode of anything Locked On Sun Devils. Now, Richie, this is probably, and I'm going to speak for you here, so definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but the Senior Bowl is something that you have personally gone to now, barring like COVID, kind of nixing that. Essentially, you've now gone to what will be 4 or 5 Senior Bowl opportunities in a row. Is that correct? 3, 4, 5, something along those lines?
This will be my 4th in 5 years. I did not go last year because that was right smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, and I was in the middle of purchasing a house. So took last year off, but I went 2018, 2019, and 2020.
So you're saying you have priorities? Whatever. Stop. Whatever. Sounds like you quit last year is what you did.
Senior Bowl is my priority. They call me a Mobile legend for a reason, Mr. Drios.
Who's they? That's like that moment in it's old school when Will Ferrell's like running down the street saying, "We're streaking." They're like, "Who's we?" There's just nobody else there.
Huh.
But you're a legend. Someone called you a legend.
See, you're a jerk because I would have told you that it's more like Ron Burgundy, where he's like, I don't know if you know this, but people know me.
Kind of a
big deal. I'm a big deal in Mobile, okay? Like, there's all sorts of fun stories that we can't really share on this podcast, but for what it's worth, if you do listen to the podcast and you see me out in Mobile, whether it's at Draft Picks or Veets or even at the stadium watching the stuff, I know there's not a lot of you, but please come up and talk to me. I absolutely love talking football, especially Arizona State and Rachaad White in particular.
So let's stick with that right there. Rachaad White's going to be the only Sun Devils representative going to the Senior Bowl. Kind of maybe walk us through the week of what we should be expecting, like kind of their practice routines, maybe interviewing opportunities, and kind of how that's going to go for Rachaad.
So it's going to be very different this year than in years past. So this year, there's not necessarily a true media day compared to years past where there's very limited opportunities to interview these guys. To my knowledge, there's actual no field access for the media during practices. It's more or less you got to go to the sidelines and talk to these guys. They specifically save that area for the coaches and the players and the personnel staff and everything like that. So it's going to be a very different look this year, but what Rachaad is going to be going through is no different than any other year. So there's going to be practices. There's going to be weigh-ins. The weigh-ins are going to be very important for him to see where he's hovering around, because it's not so much that we have a concern with how much he weighs or how tall he is, but if he can find a way to stand out in a way of like, oh, he's 6'1", 210, and look at the way he moves. I mean, that's going to get people's attention because Connor, I've been kind of stewing on this comparison for a little while, and call me crazy because of how good he was, but I see a little bit of Arian Foster to Rachaad White.
Does he have all of his ACLs, MCLs, PCLs, LC, like all that stuff? His ligaments
and his
are
hamstrings. Yes, everything is intact, unlike Arian.
That's good.
But
that's good.
I don't know. Like maybe it's the rose-colored glasses that I see the Arizona State Sun Devils out of. But I do feel like there's a lot of Arian Foster to Rachaad White's game, and if that's the case, then that's going to translate on the practice field in Mobile, man. And there's no better opportunity to really increase your draft stock, especially at the very start of the whole process. Like, sure. I'm sure you know this. For the people who don't know anything about the Senior Bowl, they have a trending hashtag that might as well be trademarked. The draft starts in Mobile. And it literally does. It's like the first big point on the map that you go through for the draft process. This is where a lot of kids make money. Just off the top of my head, you had guys like Josh Allen really solidified himself as a top 10 pick. Dak Prescott made himself a lot of money. Hassan Reddick,
he only ended up being a fourth-round pick. Dak only ended up being a fourth, but still. I
mean, there was conversations about whether or not Dak was even draftable. So there were all sorts of opportunities.
Quinton Miners last year.
Yes, the
center for
the Broncos. Yes. There's been all sorts of examples. I think the most famous guy they had was Terry Bradshaw, was the number 1 pick out of Louisiana Tech. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Walter Payton also went to the Senior Bowl. Some old running back. Yeah. So the Senior Bowl, very prestigious, Connor. It's a great honor. And I'm super, super excited to be able to go out and see Rachaad White. I've seen quite a handful of Sun Devil players over the year go to Mobile. I've never been as excited for a Sun Devil as I am with Rachaad White.
Well, hey man, let's kind of talk about his competition as well. So these guys are going to try to make themselves more money, right? They're looking to stand out, but if they're standing out from what, right? It's the rest of their competition. So we kind of touched on this on yesterday's podcast, kind of talking about really it was more like Mel Kiper's rankings of running backs. There's going to be several of them there. Several other running backs probably in that top 10 list that Rachaad White's going to be competing against, trying to make himself look a little bit different than just another running back in this draft class.
Yeah, so I got this pulled up in front of me from the NCAA's official website, and they're calling it the national team compared to the American team, which usually, Connor, we see the North versus the South team, although it gets really jumbled because sometimes ASU's on North and sometimes they're on South, and it's just a big old mess. But this year, Rachaad White falls onto what they call the national team. He will be competing at least on his practices because the West and the East don't compete against each other in practice. They only play each other on the Saturday game. But Rachaad White will be going up against Hassan Haskins, who is the biggest name here of the national team. He's the running back for Michigan. Tyler Batty, who's a stud out of Missouri, and Abram Smith, another stud out of Baylor. So, I'm sorry, there's a fifth one too. Jerome Ford from Cincinnati. So there's a lot of really good running backs that he's going to be competing against. But honestly, Connor, there's a chance that he walks out as the best running back from that group. So it's just a matter of really showing out. And as we'll talk about in just a second, and I'll just allude to it, there is a certain aspect that Rachaad White does better than the rest of these guys that could really come into play.
I'd be lying if I said I was very familiar with Jerome Ford, but like, think about that. That Cincinnati, a team that made the playoffs, and their running back is also going to the Senior Bowl. Like, regardless of how successful or unsuccessful ASU was as a team this season, Rachaad White's getting that same kind of recognition as a player of Ford's caliber as well. So now, Richie, you had just mentioned something Rachaad does extremely well. And this is something we talked a little bit about on yesterday's podcast as well. But Rachaad White, in his essentially like season and a half with ASU, made a ton of his yardage, a ton of his game up through the air, not just on the ground. So obviously running backs running in between the tackles is definitely a skill that a lot of NFL teams like to have. But Rachaad White's not exactly a small guy. So calling him a scat back kind of receiver, not necessarily the definition of Rachaad White either. So having a solid guy like of his build that can catch passes as well as he does is definitely going to be something where he can stand out from others.
100%, dude. So, I mean, it's the biggest calling card of Rachaad White's draft profile, I would tell you, is he's a great outside the tackles runner. He can do it between the tackles. He's silky smooth. He has a nose for the end zone. But what's going to make him the most money in this draft class is the fact that he can catch the football. I believe we talked about this the other day on the podcast. If not, then I definitely brought it up off mic. But to state it for the record, in case I didn't say it on the mic, I think the only running back who is a better pure receiver than Rachaad White in his draft class would be Kyren Williams out of Notre Dame. And I mean, Connor, the guys that are going down to Mobile this year, I don't know that any of them are nearly the receiving back that Rachaad White is. I'm looking at all these names one more time just to double check that I'm not missing anyone. And some of them are solid receivers, but I mean, Rachaad White could be an elite receiver. So that's where he's going to make his money. And as we know, that's his bread and butter. That's what made Rachaad so good. I remember last year he had 42 catches for 420 yards.
Yep, 10 yards a catch.
Yes, and I remember texting you. I was like, "Hey, that's pretty cool." And you're like, "That's not a lot of not
a lot of volume."
Volume. Thank you. Yes, not a lot of volume. I was like, "Hey, man, I'm just saying, like, gotta look out for Rachaad White this year." And even I didn't think that he was going to end up becoming what he became. So, like, it turned into one of those perfect storms where it turns out what he flashed was exactly what he was capable of. So, Rachaad White, an absolute stud.
Definitely. So that is the Senior Bowl. Now, we have 5 other Sun Devils going to a different bowl game, which essentially is the East-West Shrine Bowl. So it doesn't seem to be as flashy as the Senior Bowl, but it's definitely still something where players can get recognition, still improve their draft stock. So we're going to be talking about the 5 Sun Devils on essentially playing in that game.
Real quick, I need to correct myself because I said that and I immediately knew I was wrong. He had 42 carries for 420 yards, which was 10 yards a catch. However, he had 8 catches.
Oh, did you say
in 4 games. Yes.
I didn't even catch that either.
But he had 8 catches in 4 games, and he turned it into 151 yards and a touchdown. So he had 18.9 through the air. So, again, he flashed that, like, upside potential of what he could become. And it turns out that he's exactly what he is.
I guess 42 catches in 4 games would be a little ludicrous. So glad you caught that because I didn't. Yeah, I was thinking the ground too. I was going with it. I didn't even think about that.
Big yikes.
Anyways, let's talk about the East-West Shrine Bowl coming up next. But first, we have to talk to you about our friends over at NetSuite.
So this is it, Connor. The putt to win the tournament. You sink it and the championship's yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software? To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth with visibility and control over your financials, inventory, HR, planning, budgeting, and more. NetSuite is everything you need to grow all in one place. With NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time while staying well ahead of your competition. 93% of surveyed businesses increase their visibility and control after upgrading to NetSuite. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite. And for the new year, NetSuite has a new financing program for those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/locked. Head to netsuite.com/locked for this special one-of-a-kind financing offer for the #1 financial system for growing businesses. netsuite.com/locked.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Sun Devils your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Locked On Sun Devils, Connor Drias, Richard Bradshaw, talking to you guys here now about the East-West Shrine Bowl. So different than the Senior Bowl, but now we have 5 different Sun Devils playing here, Richie. So again, maybe not the same flair. I think I just used a different word a couple minutes ago that the Senior Bowl has, but still another great opportunity for our Sun Devils to essentially go and make their mark. We've talked about several of them now that have ended up declaring. I think we might not have reported one, but essentially in this game, we're going to have Kellen Diesch, left tackle for Arizona State, DJ Davison, who played defensive tackle for us up the middle. Then we have inside linebacker Darian Butler, who we've talked about a couple times, and then cornerbacks Jack Jones and Chase Lucas. So, Richie, we now have essentially 6 different Sun Devils, and we haven't even talked about Donovan West, who more than likely is going to get drafted. But 6 different Sun Devils who really have some hype to be solid draft picks. I think we've set that line, what, at like 3.5 as of right now?
Really 3.5 is the concrete number that we have given dozens of times. And at this point, I feel like we just need to market it almost. So.
Okay. Well, I mean, if we start taking the over easy, we might have to start pushing that up to 4.5. So,
yes.
But now, essentially for the East-West Shrine Bowl, I am not as familiar with this as I am the Senior Bowl. Do we know if all 5 of those Sun Devils players are going to be on the same team? Like, is that kind of split up generally East-West? Or is it kind of like the Senior Bowl that you were describing? Like, sometimes it's North and South, and ASU isn't always on the same team.
No, that typically, Connor, is going to be lined up with where you're located. So
you should be on the West team.
Yes, and all of our Sun Devils are going to be on the same team. So again, you run through those names: DJ Davidson, Tyler Johnson, Chase Lucas, Jack Jones, and Kellen Deesh are all going to be on the West team for the Shrine Bowl.
A lot of solid names here. One that caught my eye is also going to be Dorian Thompson Robinson. Now that one's interesting to me because I'm just spitballing here, but I thought, wasn't he coming back? Doesn't he have an extra year of eligibility?
I could have swore he is coming back. So that's weird to me.
So we'll have to talk, or we'll have to figure that one out off air. But yeah, so still a lot of money to be made for these Sun Devils here. Now, Richie, if I were to highlight maybe one you were probably maybe most concerned about getting drafted, and that's going to differ on the team, right? It's not about stats in college. It's not always about physical build. There are interviews. There are workouts to be done, right? There's so much that goes into an actual draft pick. Is there one of these Sun Devils you think essentially has the most to gain from this bowl game?
I would tell you, like, the most to gain, like just outstanding the whole week, would probably be Tyler Johnson. Because I feel like your two corners with Lucas and Jack.
We didn't say Tyler Johnson's name, did we? I don't know if Tyler Johnson's going to this.
Is Tyler Johnson not?
No, we have 5. So it's
DJ Davidson,
Deesh, unless we're looking at.
Oh no, you're right. Tyler Johnson isn't there. I goofed that and I said Darian Butler, or I said Tyler Johnson instead of Darian Butler. Okay.
Well, I was going to say, like, unless we're looking at different lists.
No. You're totally right. So let me amend that. I would tell you in that case that Darian Butler is going to be the guy who can get the most out of this. This is a very muddied linebacker class, and you see so many fluctuating opinions on where Butler is. Again, we talked about yesterday. Mel Kiper has him as a 6th linebacker in this class, but the Draft Network has him like outside the top 300 players. So I would tell you that if Darian Butler goes into Las Vegas and just absolutely dominates this Shrine Bowl, he can walk away as like the most successful player from the Shrine Bowl. Maybe of all the guys there would be Darian Butler shining brightest and shining the most, because he's got that talent, Connor. We all know it. This is a Darian Butler Stan account, and firmly believe that the opportunity is in front of him. I think he can seize it. And if he does it, I mean, is it too much to say top 100? Is that too much?
I don't think it's that crazy. I mean, at the end of the day, like, no matter what expert you talk to or whose rankings you look at, there are surprise picks in every round, every single round, mostly by the Raiders. But you do have a lot of players taken where it's just like, huh? And even if it's a bad pick or not at the time, like, you have to let these things play out, right? Give players several years to really see where they fit in the NFL. But because there's times where picks are made and people scratch their heads as to why do they take that guy, and they end up being great. So really, it's all about value. Like, go get your guy, and that's exactly what teams are going to go do. I'm not too concerned about Darian Butler, Kellen Deesh, or Jack Jones. Now, as far as like actual NFL draft talent, DJ Davidson and Chase Lucas, I think, really need to be focused for this weekend. It's not so much that I think they're bad players. I just think they're less high profile. So ideally, they can make the most of this week and essentially make the most money. Because as of right now, I don't think either of them are going to the NFL Combine, to my knowledge. So at this point, after the East-West Shrine Bowl, they're probably focusing on their pro days for ASU, which will be exciting. That we'll have 6, 7, 8 guys that are really going to be participating in that. Hopefully, essentially going to be on full display for everybody. But DJ Davidson and Chase Lucas, I think, are the guys I would highlight as maybe I'm more concerned about. But can totally see them getting picked a little bit later.
Pretty much. So these guys definitely have a lot to gain, Connor. This is a really good opportunity for them. I know the Shrine Bowl doesn't have the same, for lack of a better term, shine
pizzazz
that the Senior Bowl has. Yeah, the pizzazz. It's not the sexier of the two, but it definitely has the intrigue for NFL scouts. There's still gonna be people there just because they're not going to Mobile, Alabama for the best barbecue in the whole world at Moe's for what it's worth. But I mean, neither here nor there. There's still the appeal of the Shrine Bowl. So don't let people tell you otherwise. The Shrine Bowl is still a very big deal. And there's an opportunity here for 5 Arizona State Sun Devils to continue improving their draft stock.
One more dumb question. You might know this off the top of your head. So I know it's going to kick off this weekend.
All your questions are dumb.
That's very true. Media day begins, I think it's this Friday, if I'm not mistaken. Then they have practices. Like this ends, I think, right. It might even go kind of a hand in hand with the Senior Bowl a little bit. But do we know if or like what NFL coaches are going to be at this? Like the Senior Bowl always has a couple NFL coaches. Is it kind of the same thing for the East-West Shrine Bowl?
I believe it is. I'm honestly not 100% sure. Let's take a look because I got the website.
That's more
for me right now. Is the
more
coach
so for
selection.
my knowledge. So
yes. So coach selection, blah 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 blah. Well, that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked, Connor.
Because normally, so it should be what this isn't necessarily breaking news, but Byron Leftwich will be now the new head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. With the first overall pick, I think is going to be one of the maybe coaches. Well, they get the playoffs. Actually, I guess I don't know how that works. Normally, it's the first overall pick, right? He's one of the coaches.
So not always. So typically, they won't let you go. This isn't the case in the Senior Bowl. I don't know how it works for the Shrine Bowl, but when it comes to the Senior Bowl, they do not let guys coach back-to-back years just because you're picking first overall. So the Jaguars will not be coaching at the Senior Bowl.
Hey, it's different guys.
You're not wrong, but the Senior Bowl don't care.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I wasn't able to find who the coaches of the Shrine Bowl are. If I find them, I'll let you know. But without sitting here and doodling on my computer for the remainder of the podcast, which I would prefer not to do, but couldn't tell you.
Well, again, very excited for those 5 Sun Devils players going to that game. A lot to be gained this weekend and the next week and a half, really, for all of our Sun Devils. So hoping the best for them. Now talking to you essentially about the last 2 games for Arizona State basketball. The game against USC, not so close. Game against Stanford, very close. But we're noticing a bit of a pattern. Not so much that it's the reason they're losing both these games, but essentially the lack of foul calls for Arizona State's side. Is that an issue? And we'll talk about that more coming up next. But first, we have to talk to you guys about our good friends over at BetOnline. So BetOnline would like to wish you guys a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the #1 spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Hey guys, Richie Bradshaw here, host of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast and the best podcast in the whole world with an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. Right now, my listeners are earning cash back for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use the promo code SCORE for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first fill up cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use promo code SCORE for 25 cents per gallon on your first tank. Some people like myself who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a year in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash gets added right to your account. You can cash out at any time to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use the promo code SCORE to get 25 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. That's promo code SCORE on GetUpside.
Locked On Sun Devils host Connor Drias and Richard Bradtalk coming to you guys for the last part of the podcast today. ASU, they have not had very many free throws over the last 2 games. Now, they've been efficient with those. I think against Stanford, they made like 7 of 9. And then I think against USC, they went 4 of 5. So overall, they're shooting just under 80% in their last 2 games. That's very solid as a team, but not a lot of volume. Richie, on the other side, so really quick, that's 14 free throw attempts. On the other side, they're being essentially the 2 opposing teams have 60 free throw attempts in the last 2 games. Now, I understand that all 60 of those free throws were plenty of those were penalties on ASU's side. Plenty, if not all. That being said, like
technically all
of them.
Technically.
But in sports, like there is a bit of a human element, especially when it comes to referees, umpires, whatever sort of official we're talking about here. There is a human element of what seems to be subjectiveness. Now, basketball, it feels like there can be calls where they're just a little bit ticky-tacky, but now as far as like maybe some of those ticky-tacky calls, ASU doesn't seem to be getting those same calls that their opponents are getting. And in basketball, whether it's college or the NBA, it feels like the better teams or the better players kind of have to earn the fouls. It's something that's talked about. It gets brought up every now and then. Like going to the NBA, like LeBron is a great example of a guy who generally gets his foul calls. Speaking with maybe some potential Suns fans, especially over the last couple of years, where Devin Booker has seemed to earn his foul call. So
love him.
Which, as of right now, like it's just the way that refereeing seems to go, and they wouldn't necessarily talk about that out loud, saying, "Yeah, of course, that's how we do it." But at the end of the day, it's just been a narrative around basketball for a long, long time, and it seemed to have kind of hit ASU over the past 2 games.
100%, man. So, but here's the thing: I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second, and as me and you both know, and I know you are 100% of this opinion. Is you can't blame the refs for when you're losing games and whatnot, right? But obviously, when you get penalized as many times as Arizona State has, and you put the opposing teams on the line as often as it's happened, it definitely feels like something's up. So here's what I'll say. And it goes, this is a double-edged sword. It goes both ways. It goes for ASU committing penalties, and it goes for all the calls that the opposing teams had. This is a very famous saying, and I know you've heard it before, and I'm sure our fans have too. 1 is a fluke. 2 is a pattern. So I'm curious, what's going on here? Are the refs against Arizona State for some god-awful reason? Because heaven knows we just need one more thing to go against us. Or the more likely option, are the Sun Devils just playing really, really sloppy basketball right now?
Do you think heaven's really in favor of the Sun Devils? I mean, maybe not. Hey,
look, we're sponsored by Disney, so take that with a grain of salt.
Again, echoing your point, Rich, like we're not saying that the refs are necessarily like they're definitely not the reason we're losing these games. A lot of what ASU has done to put other teams in line, like they deserve it. But at the same time, teams we're not going to have the exact same penalties. That's just not going to happen. You would just like to see it a little bit more even than what it has been. And if that's the case, you might have a win against Stanford and maybe a little bit of a closer loss because you got blown out by USC. So it's not like the foul troubles or lack of overall foul calls for the reason you didn't win that game. But it's at least a talking point moving forward. At the end of the day, are we going to look back on this season if we don't essentially have an overall great season, didn't even quite get to 500 and say, man, the refs just really weren't on our side? No, that'd be ridiculous. But it's the pattern as of right now and something to watch going forward because as I had mentioned, if the stars of individual players or the great teams generally get their foul calls, the next 4 games where they're playing ranked opponents, they could be in trouble. If other teams are getting more foul calls and have more free throw attempts, that's a leg up, right? That is an advantage right there. That doesn't even we're not even mentioning the fact that these other teams are already better than ASU as a whole. These other teams don't need that advantage. So if we continue to see this pattern severely the way we have over the last 2 games. It may not be 4 times the amount, but even still, if it's anything close to 3 over the next 4 games, I don't even know what ASU has to do at that point.
No, 100%. And just adding on to our point here is like this is the kind of stuff, Connor, that derails anything that you're trying to get going. So all that momentum that ASU has been trying to build up with everything that's been going on, you basically can almost throw it out the window right now because they can't figure it out. They can't get out of their own way. They're constantly tripping over themselves. Like something's got to give, man. And right now they're giving a lot of free throw opportunities. So they got to clean this stuff up because this isn't feasible. We're already inventing ways to lose games right now. The last thing you need is to give the opponents even more opportunities to get easy points on you.
Yep. To echo your last point there, part of it does fall on ASU for sure. Really, really trying to not get into foul trouble early and often. If they can essentially stay out of it and give the refs a little bit less of a reason to make these calls, that might be something that's a little bit more advantageous for them as well. But that'll go ahead and do it for us on today's podcast. Richie, do we make an announcement now, or are we just going to leave that over Twitter?
No, we're going to save it for Twitter. So like, it just so excited for the Friday's episode. Like, I think you guys are going to be so beyond thrilled. Me and Connor are like totally humbled and so excited for what we got going for you guys for the Friday episode. That's all I'll say. And we'll tease the heck of it on Twitter too. So that's just one more reason to follow us on Twitter, right, Connor? Where can they find us?
You can find me at Cedrios. You can find Richard Bradshaw at Richard Brads with a Z36. Essentially from our Locked On Sun Devils Twitter page tomorrow, we'll be making an exciting announcement for tomorrow's episode. You can find us at LO_Sun Devils. We also have content that comes out Monday through Friday for you guys, whether that's Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, YouTube, Stitcher. Monday through Friday, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Never miss an episode, guys. With that, thank you so much for making us your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On Bets. They're going to be your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms. You keep it locked on right here with the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.